The Great War was meant to end all wars. It didn't. The Treaty of Versailles punished Germany harshly. Blame, land, money and pride stripped away. Germans felt humiliated and angry, their economy shattered by reparations. This resentment simmered, fueling a dangerous desire for revenge. The 1920s brought hope, but the Great Depression crushed economies worldwide. Unemployment soared. Desperation spread. People turned to strong leaders who promised change, even at the cost of freedom. In Italy, Mussolini's fascism rose, promising a return to Roman glory. Japan's military seized power, seeking expansion and resources in Asia. These ambitions set the stage for global conflict. Germany nursed its wounds, Italy dreamed of empire, and Japan eyed its neighbors. Economic hardship made the world volatile. The peace after World War I was fragile. Resentment, ambition, and fear everywhere. The world was a powder keg, waiting for a spark. The lessons of the past were ignored. History was about to repeat itself in the most brutal way imaginable. Across continents, the seeds of war were sown. The world teetered on the edge of catastrophe. The coming storm would engulf millions. The stage was set for a second, even more terrible, global conflict. The world held its breath. The spark was coming. In Germany, Adolf Hitler seized his moment. He led the Nazi Party, promising to tear up the Treaty of Versailles and restore German pride. He blamed Jews and communists for Germany's woes, spreading hate and fear. Amid the Great Depression, millions listened. In 1933, Hitler became chancellor. Democracy vanished. The Nazis silenced opposition and built a totalitarian state. Secretly, Hitler rebuilt the military, defying the treaty. He called his regime the Third Reich, promising it would last 1,000 years. Britain and France, haunted by memories of war, chose appeasement, hoping to avoid conflict by giving in to some of Hitler's demands. This only emboldened him. In 1936, German troops marched into the Rhineland. No one stopped them. In 1938, Austria was annexed. Again, the world did nothing. Later that year, Hitler demanded the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia. Britain and France agreed at Munich, believing they'd secured peace. They were wrong. Hitler saw appeasement as weakness. Germany, Italy, and Japan formed the Axis, united by expansion and hatred of democracy. Italy invaded Ethiopia. Japan attacked China, committing atrocities like the Nanking Massacre. The League of Nations was powerless. The Axis tested the world's resolve, pushing boundaries. The world waited, breath held for the plunge into darkness. The final push was coming. War loomed. By 1939, Hitler's ambitions were clear. Austria and Czechoslovakia had fallen. Now he demanded Polish territory. Poland, backed by Britain and France, refused. Hitler needed to avoid a two-front war, so he struck a shocking deal with Stalin, the Nazi-Soviet pact. Publicly, they agreed not to attack each other. Secretly, they planned to divide Poland. On September 1, 1939, German forces invaded Poland. Blitzkrieg had begun. Tanks and bombers overwhelmed Polish defenses. The world watched in horror. Britain and France issued an ultimatum: withdraw or face war. Hitler ignored them. On September 3rd, Britain and France declared war on Germany. World War II had begun. In London and Paris, people braced for the worst. The peace was shattered. The spark in Poland ignited a global fire. The world was at war again. The conflict would spread far beyond Europe. The nightmare had returned. The world would never be the same. After Poland fell, Europe entered the phony war, a tense, uneasy calm. In spring 1940, Germany struck again. Denmark, Norway, then France. Bypassing the Maginot Line, German tanks swept through the Ardennes, catching the Allies off guard. British and French troops were trapped at Dunkirk. In a daring rescue, hundreds of boats evacuated over 300,000 soldiers. France soon surrendered. Britain stood alone. Hitler planned to invade, but first needed air superiority. The Battle of Britain raged in the skies. RAF pilots held firm, forcing Hitler to abandon his invasion. The war spread beyond Europe. In North Africa, British and Commonwealth forces battled Axis armies in the desert. In Asia, Japan expanded its brutal war in China. December 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, drawing the United States into the conflict. The war became truly global, fought from Russia's snows to the Pacific's jungles. The world was engulfed in conflict. No continent was untouched. The scale of destruction was unprecedented. The stakes had never been higher. The world was at war everywhere. For civilians, war meant daily terror, air raid sirens, bomb shelters, shattered homes. Cities like London, Coventry, and Dresden were devastated by bombing. Rationing made food and essentials scarce. People queued for hours. Victory gardens and make do and mend became survival strategies. Women filled factories and farms, keeping the war machine running. Soldiers faced fear, boredom, and constant danger riding home, dreaming of peace. The psychological and physical toll was immense. Communities pulled together. Volunteers risked their lives as wardens, firefighters, and medics. Resistance movements fought back in occupied countries, sabotaging the enemy and aiding allies. Acts of courage and defiance shone in the darkness. The suffering was immense, but so was the resilience. The war tested humanity's limits. Ordinary people became heroes. The human spirit endured even in the darkest times. The cost was staggering, but hope survived. Amid the chaos, the Nazis waged a secret war, the Holocaust. Jews were stripped of rights, forced into ghettos, and marked for death. In 1942, the final solution was launched: genocide on an industrial scale. Millions were transported to extermination camps like Auschwitz and Treblinka. Families were torn apart, the old, sick, and children sent to gas chambers. Others were worked to death, stripped of dignity and identity. 6 million Jews were murdered, along with millions of others, Roma, disabled, political prisoners, and more. When Allied soldiers liberated the camps, they found horror beyond belief. The world was forced to confront the depths of evil. The Holocaust remains a permanent warning. Hatred and intolerance left unchecked can lead to unimaginable crimes. The memory endures as a call to vigilance. Humanity's darkest hour must never be forgotten. The world was changed forever. The cost of hatred was written in blood. By 1942, the Axis seemed unstoppable, but the tide was turning. 3 battles changed everything. In the Pacific, the U.S. Navy crushed Japan at Midway, halting their advance. In North Africa, the British won at El Alamein, pushing Axis forces out. Operation Torch brought American and British troops to Africa, sealing Axis defeat there. On the Eastern Front, Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union stalled at Stalingrad. The Red Army encircled and destroyed the German Sixth Army, a catastrophic loss for Germany. The Soviets began pushing west, determined to liberate their homeland. The scale of fighting was immense, millions involved, the stakes existential. With victories in the Pacific, Africa, and the Soviet Union, the Allies seized the initiative. The momentum had shifted. The Allies were on the attack. The final chapter in Europe was about to begin. The end of the Axis was in sight. The world dared to hope again. With the Axis in retreat, the Allies prepared for the decisive blow, Operation Overlord, the invasion of France. On June 6, 1944, D-Day, Allied forces stormed Normandy's beaches under heavy fire. Despite fierce resistance, they secured a foothold. The Battle of Normandy was brutal, but by August, Paris was liberated. Allied armies swept across France and Belgium, closing in on Germany. In December, Hitler's last gamble, the Battle of the Bulge, failed. From the west, Allies crossed the Rhine from the east. The Soviets closed on Berlin. Hitler, trapped in his bunker, took his own life as Berlin fell. On May 8, 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe was over. Crowds celebrated VE Day in London, Paris, and Moscow. The nightmare had ended, at least in Europe. The cost was immense, but freedom had prevailed. The world rejoiced, but the war was not yet over everywhere. The Pacific still burned. The final act was yet to come. The world braced for the end. In the Pacific, Japan refused to surrender, fighting with relentless ferocity. Kamikaze pilots crashed into Allied ships. Invasion loomed with millions at risk. President Truman faced a terrible choice: use a new, devastating weapon, the atomic bomb. On August 6, 1945, Hiroshima was destroyed in an instant. 3 days later, Nagasaki suffered the same fate. The devastation was unimaginable. Emperor Hirohito finally announced Japan's surrender. On September 2, 1945, the war officially ended. Over 60 million were dead, cities and nations lay in ruins, old empires faded, the US and Soviet Union emerged as superpowers. To prevent future catastrophe, the United Nations was founded in 1945. The war's lessons were written in blood and ash. From the ruins, hope for peace was born. The world was forever changed. The cost was staggering, but a new era had begun. The shadow of war lingered, but so did the dream of peace. The world looked to the future, determined never to repeat the past.